Before we begin, since this is a BBC-owned property, I feel the need to point out that the news arm of the BBC has a continuing issue with transphobic leanings in its news coverage. You can find in a pinned comment below various videos from both myself and other YouTubers covering this issue. And while I understand that the Doctor Who creative team is not responsible for this, I will continue to point this out for as long as it remains a consistent issue. Thank you.
If you really want to understand somebody, take a look at the company they keep. Well, hello there, folks. I am continuing to redo some rankings for Doctor Who that I've done in the past. And one of the more highly viewed ones that I did a little while ago was a ranking of all the modern day companions. And it's time I revisit that. However, in the interest of having this be more than just slotting in, I think it ends up being about 4 companions who weren't included in my original list, I am also going to change my criteria. So when I did it before in that previous list, my criteria was that I counted as a companion anyone who appeared in more than one story, and reminder, I count two-parters as only one story, appeared in more than one story and actually traveled in the TARDIS. Not just saw it, not just entered it, actually traveled in it. Now, I did actually end up missing Vincent, who technically met my criteria, and I didn't realize that, but that was the basis for that original list. Now, that criteria actually caused me some headaches at the time because even though, like I said, I missed Vincent, it did let in a bunch of people who I would rather not have talked about, like Angie and Artie, Adam Mitchell, Jackie Tyler, characters who it kind of felt odd to include as companions, but they met the criteria I set out, so I did. This time, I'm changing the criteria. This time, I'm going to count as a companion anyone whose actor was named in the opening title credits, excepting, of course, someone who's playing the Doctor and also actually the Master, because John Sim was listed in the opening credits for The End of Time. So discounting them, because, yeah, those aren't companions, anyone who had their name listed, that is going to bring them on board. So that actually means this list is only slightly shorter than the previous one, I think only by like 1 or 2 people, because the previous list, while it brought in some folks like Adam Mitchell, Angie and Artie, like I mentioned, it also left out all of the one-off companions from the specials. This criteria that I'm using now ditches some of the random folks who slipped in before, but does bring in all the one-timers. So this is actually a fairly different list from the ground up, although a lot of the same people obviously still appear. So that's the criteria I'm using this time. Oh, and I should probably also, cop to the fact that part of the reason I alter my criteria is that my old criteria kept in Mickey Smith. My new criteria allows me to discard him, and I really don't want to talk about Noel Clarke or the character he portrays. So, that's in the mix, but I still think it was worth it to change the criteria anyways. But before I get started, there's 23 of these. I don't actually dislike any of them. I like all of these. It's just a matter of who I like best. So even the one at the very bottom, number 23, where we're going to start, I'm okay with them. I don't have a problem with them. They're not bad. But I still have to do this in some kind of order. So here we go. Starting with number 23, Lady Christina de Souza from The Dead Planet. Or is it Planet of the Dead? I can't remember. I always get it mixed up. In any case, she is a nobility. She is an adventurer. She just likes the thrill. She's very take command. She's got great chemistry with Tennant, which she kind of needs. So why do I have her all the way down here? Well, because she's kind of too perfect, and that's actually kind of by design. The whole intent with her, narratively, was to create a companion who, boy, they would have been great together, but we're not doing that. So it kind of exists as a, that would have been neat, but it never was sort of thing, which, I think that's kind of an interesting thing to do on purpose. But part of the thing is, as a result, there isn't actually much depth to their dynamic. They just click well together, and that's kind of it. Oddly, while their chemistry is one of the better aspects of a not such a great special, I am left thinking, I get that they work decently together. I don't feel like I actually need to ever see them on another adventure, though, because I'm left feeling what I saw here is just what the dynamic would almost always be. It didn't feel like it had room for change or for growth, which again, by design, it didn't need it. But it did just kind of leave me going, that's good chemistry, but that's a real simple dynamic. And just based on the criteria of, I wouldn't really be that interested in seeing them together again. That's why she's at the bottom. Number 22, Astrid Peth. So I feel a little bad putting Astrid way down here, but again, it's kind of the obviousness of it. She does seem in many ways crafted to just be almost kind of an ideal companion for Tennant, someone who is excited, wants adventure, is ready to go out and explore the stars, and who he has a decent connection with. Just seems like a fundamentally good person. In this case, it's constructed for tragedy rather than kind of a, oh, that's a shame they never got together thing the way it is with Christina. And as a result, I feel like Astrid has just a little bit more depth. And honestly, I kind of feel like RTD is just better at kind of needling the feels with a character like Astrid. And I like that Astrid, made that choice to sacrifice herself to save, the doctor, and by extension, basically everybody else. That takes a lot to do. And I think it boosts her up just a little over Christina, even though in terms of my overall feel on them, they're actually quite similar in terms of my assessment, even though the characters are fairly different. Number 21, Captain Archival, Lethbridge Stewart from Twice Upon a Time. Mark Gatiss playing a relation, I think it's grandfather. It's either grandfather or father. I did the math at one point to figure out which it was, and I can't remember now. But of the Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. And he's actually a really nice presence. The reason he's this far down just largely has to do with the fact that he doesn't do much. I mean, honestly, the first Doctor functions more like a companion to the 12th Doctor than this character functions as a companion to either of them. That said, he brings a good sense of stoicism. He has that sense of duty that just makes sense for somebody who is in the trenches in World War I, probably recognizes that this entire situation is messed up, but still feels an obligation to perform duty. He brings that across in a way that isn't just a cliche, just, oh, stiff upper lip, okay. Like, there's some of that there, but it's clearly a facade. It's hiding a lot of fear and pain and doubt, and he portrays that very well. But again, the reason he's down here is not because the characterization is bad, but just because the character doesn't do much. He's mostly just a vehicle to get us to the Christmas armistice, which he's effective at that, but there isn't much more to him as far as use in the story. Next up, number 20, stepping away from one-off companions from specials, we have Ryan Sinclair. Ryan was a character who, honestly, it was actually kind of hard for me to assess Ryan and Graham as separate entities because a lot of their stuff was based off playing off each other and working together. But when I tried to assess them separately, Ryan kind of had the least going on as a character. I mean, we could go on about the depiction of his dyspraxia, how well that was handled, how often the show seemed to forget that he had it or brought it up at odd moments where it actually didn't impact anything. And Ryan is a pleasant enough guy to have around. He just doesn't seem to bring much with him. Like I said, the main thing he seemed to bring was an extra dynamic for Graham to have, but as a character unto himself, he often just feels like he's along for the ride. Now, he's not distracting. I don't feel that he drags things down with his presence, but he also doesn't contribute a great deal. So why is he above some of the others? Well, honestly, just by virtue of the fact that he was a regular companion, and if he can stick around for 2 full series plus a special in there, and I'm not going, you really are starting to drag things down, well, then clearly he at least works over a long period of time, and that's worth a little bit more than the one-offs that I listed before. Number 19, this will probably be my most controversial placement, that this person wasn't at the bottom. Well, no, it won't be, but I suspect some people are going to be like, what? Madge Arwell. Now look, I know it's become very in fashion to hate the hell out of The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. I kind of like it. Like, it's cheesy and it's kind of dumb, but I like it. And most of what I like about it is admittedly Madge. I like that motherly yet somewhat commanding presence that she has. Like, it's maternal, but like firm-handed maternal. And she has just for me, for my taste, just the right level of quirkiness to her. That easily can and oftentimes does get overplayed when you deliberately make a quirky character. For me, it was just the right amount of quirky, and you can see with moments like her husband, who just, when she says something that doesn't make sense to him, he's just like, well, okay then. That, you know, she has a way to balance that, and she's found people in her life that find it at best unobtrusive, if not endearing. And I just really love the way she basically scolds the Doctor for not being with his friends on Christmas. Somebody should have, and she does it really well. Number 18, Dan Lewis. Now, I did end up liking Dan quite a bit more than I thought I was going to. When it was first announced that John Bishop was going to be joining the series for Flux, I got actually really irritated because I had hoped with Ryan and Graham leaving that there was going to be a lot more focus and attention paid to Yasmin and developing the dynamic between Yasmin and the Doctor and bringing in another companion distracted from that. And it did, but he is still an endearing guy. The reason he's not higher than this is that pretty much everything that I do enjoy about him is a credit to John Bishop and a certain inherent endearing nature to him as a performer, because there actually is very little to the character. I mean, the things that we learn about him, that, you know, he wants to do well by other people, it seems to prioritize helping other people over himself. Like, he's helping with the food pantry, but he's not taking any for himself, despite the fact that he barely has anything to his cabinet. That does tell us little bits about him, but none of it really seems to come into play. He's pretty underwritten, and he's largely saved by the charisma of the performer, which absolutely counts for something. That's why he's not lower. But you take him on paper, and it's just not much there. Number 17, Santa Claus. Yeah, Nick Frost got listed in the credits. I get to put Santa on this list. And again, a bit like Madge, is it kind of silly, cheesy? Yeah, but Nick Frost is a real good Santa. And I love that wonderful, jovial, but like at the same time, not quite menacing, but just slightly, I know more about what's going on than you do vibe that he has when interacting with someone like the Doctor, especially. But like right from the off, when he's talking to Clara, I just love everything about what he brings forward. It feels very much like the realistic version of what the legend would be. So it's not like undercutting the myths of, you know, jolly, caring, and all of that, but it's like, okay, yeah, but let's ground him a little bit in terms of his personality and everything. But you can also see from the way he interacts and cares about people where the bigger myth of the jolly guy giving toys came from. And I like it. Number 16. Yasmin Khan. Yaz has actually kind of benefited from me starting to do my rewatch of the Jodie Whittaker era. So I'm looking back at her from back in Series 11, and I'm realizing there is stronger and more consistent groundwork laid for her as a person, like her personality and her characterization, than happened definitely with Ryan, and arguably even necessarily with Graham. Now, she's not higher than this because I feel like it basically has a lot of missed opportunities. There's a lot more that could have been done with her than ultimately was. And this isn't even about the fact that I don't love the ship of her and the Doctor. I don't, but that's not ultimately my disappointment with her. My disappointment was things like, well, what I mentioned before, Dan coming on board and missing the opportunity to really dive into the connection she has with the Doctor. And if you pay attention to stuff that goes on in the background, it does get built over series 11 and 12, but it never really gets much of a proper focus. And if you're not paying full attention, then the moments where it crops up more prominently, it can feel underdeveloped because they've been doing it very quietly in the background, which in the hands of a stronger writing team could have felt like good build-up, but in the hands of the writing team that Chibnall headed, it didn't quite pan out that way. So I do like Yaz. Well, as I said, I actually like all these people, but she can't go any higher than this because there's so much unrealized potential to her as a character and as a companion. Number 15, Clara Oswald. I'm softer on Clara than I used to be. I used to really dislike Clara. The thing is that, first of all, much like with Dan, that is an issue of writing, not of performance. Jenna Coleman actually is wonderfully charismatic as this character. I get why Moffat kept her around as much as I kind of wish he hadn't. He kept writing good exit points for her and she kept not leaving. But the thing about Clara is her intro is weak because Series 7B, where she gets introduced properly, the version of her that we get that actually travels with the Doctor feels less developed and less complete as a person than the one-off versions we got in Asylum of the Daleks and the Snowmen. So there's your first issue. But she also, to my opinion, doesn't have a great rapport with Smith. It never quite clicks. I don't think that's necessarily an issue of chemistry between the performers, so much as it is that the entire reason the Doctor is even interested in her is because she's mysterious to him and he's trying to figure her out, which basically doesn't lend itself to creating a good interpersonal dynamic because he's not traveling with her to get to know her. He's traveling with her to unravel a mystery. And it's just not a terrific dynamic. That having been said, she has much better chemistry with Capaldi. The two characters click way, way better. They actually do a lot to bring out interesting aspects of each other. I don't necessarily say the best aspects of each other, because part of the point that Hellbent was trying to make was that what they brought out of each other, particularly what she brought out of him, was actually potentially dangerous. And there is that as well, but that is also interesting and layered. And watching that develop over time, and I even like the relationship that they had with her and Danny Pink, the way that played out and what it showed about her as a person and her priorities. I feel like things just built actually fairly well from the start of Series 8 with Deep Breath right up through Face the Raven. Then Hellbent happened, and that's the other reason why I can't put her higher than this. But that middle stretch, she does work. Number 14, Adelaide Brook. Back to a one-off appearance. So this is from Waters of Mars, which is, yes, it's a special that I've said and I do feel is overrated, in some circles drastically overrated, but is still good. And the performance of Adelaide Brook is absolutely one of the highlights. She has a wonderful presence, and you definitely get why this is the person in charge. She has that vibe and that feeling as soon as she shows up on camera. And it's great to see it, first of all, used to get her crew in line and to try and get them off that station, and then later trying to get the Doctor to realize the mistake he has made and is making, and having the strength of character to go to the lengths that she does to snap him out of it. So it's just a really, really powerful core performance. It just is. Number 13, Jackson Lake. Now, I'm not going to argue that Jackson Lake is a better performed or deeper or more nuanced character than, say, Adelaide Brook. He just happens to click really well for me, especially after he gets his own memories back. Like, him blustering about being the Doctor, that's fun on its own, but once he is himself again, I love him. I love him so much. To see the fear as a parent, to see that fear when he remembers and he sees his son in danger, to see the joy at the Doctor triumphing, and especially the interactions he has with the Doctor towards the very end when he sees the TARDIS and he just has to step inside, and until it kind of overwhelms him, he describes it as wonderful nonsense, and then it overwhelms him and he scoots out and is like, oh, no, that's quite enough. I'm like, you are just a magical human being. I love that he can understand the Doctor enough to see that the Doctor is kind of avoiding some pain and like needs some companionship, but also is enough of person of his time and his own person that he's like, I'm not traveling with you. It's too much for me. But I would still like you to join us for Christmas dinner. There's just something about when that switch happens and he gets his own personality back. He just works for me on just about every level. Next up, number 12, Nardole. Nardole is, well, honestly, a bit like Clara and even a bit like some of the characters I'm going to talk about who are higher ranked than this. Doesn't start out great. His first appearance in Husbands of River Song is not very good. He's actually kind of irritating, and the way he's played for laughs grates on me real quick. He started to work better with the next special, The Return of Dr. Mysterio, but then by the time we got to Series 10, he actually works for me really well. He still has his little joke moments, but you get that determination from him, that he's there to keep the Doctor in line, and that he takes that job very seriously. And that is a way to inject a spine into him as a character. So that, yeah, he's jokey. Yeah, he's making silly gags. Yeah, he pulls goofy faces now and then. But he also is not joking around when it comes to the job he's there to do. And I like a character who doesn't lose their personality in a sense of who they are because they have a job to do. But when that job needs doing, yeah, they will knuckle down and they will do it. I like Nardole a lot for that. Number 11, Graham O'Brien. Now, as with some of the others, a lot of this is the performer. Bradley Walsh brings a wonderful sense of just wanting to explore more of the universe, but also kind of getting that he doesn't get it, which is something that he's able to bring to that part. I tend to like the slightly older companions, and not just here. Like, one of my favorite companions from Big Finish is Evelyn Smythe, who part of why she's so good for the Sixth Doctor is that she is, at least as far as physical appearance and her general attitude, a bit older than he is. And she stands up to him more as a result. Now, Graham doesn't stand up to the Doctor more, but he brings a different dynamic, having more life experience than the others do. And so for him, this is a bit more of a, almost kind of a bucket list thing to do rather than a adventure of youth. And that sense of, I can barely keep up, but I don't want this adventure to stop that he brings is really endearing to me. And also, as much as I will continue to argue, I don't think it was necessary to kill off Grace. He performs that grief and that loss really, really well. I mean, the character suffers from some of the writing inconsistencies that a lot of series 11, 12, and Flux suffer from, but you probably notice them with him the least because the performance elevates all of it to somebody who you're just like, I'm happy just to have you around and just to even say little lines here and there because he's always wanting to help. I think that's a big thing. That's like his core trait. He always wants to be helpful, even if he isn't sure the best way to do that. And not in like an insistent, I must be the one in charge way, but just in a, what do you need? Tell me what you need, I'll do it. And it's that desire to help that is actually written in. As much as I'm saying the performance elevates it, that is a written trait of the character. It is brought even more by a perfect pairing of performer to material. Number 10. Another one some people are going to get mad at me for, actually. Rose Tyler. I know some people are super into Rose. Seems like a lot of the people who are 10 and Rose shippers, which I'm very much not. But the thing with Rose, she actually has one of the more in-depth and nuanced relationships with the Doctor, partly because of her flaws as a person. She is jealous. She can be petty sometimes in a way that makes for a more interesting dynamic, not only with the Doctor, but with the other people they encounter. But it's also a trait I don't really care for. It's not something I particularly enjoy watching. But that said, Billie Piper does have really good and unique chemistry with both the 9th Doctor and the 10th Doctor. While I'm not a Rose and 10 shipper, I get why people are. And it is interesting that it is a different dynamic that she has with each version of the Doctor she travels with. but both are believable, and believable is coming from the same character. I like the way that she grounds the Ninth Doctor, and I like the way she energizes the 10th Doctor. She is really good for them, and Billie Piper does exude just that sense of, yeah, I do kind of want to be around you, even though there's certain aspects of your personality like I don't love, but for the most part, yeah, I do like all these people, but yeah, some people are going to be mad at me for putting her kind of middle like this. Number 9, River Song. Now, this is another one that might get controversial for some. I know people who don't like River Song really don't like River Song. And for a lot of people, she embodies the degradation of Moffat's writing to a certain extent. And admittedly, she is unfortunately tied up in some of his most clunkily written or overwritten or technobabble style stories. Things like The Wedding of River Song or Let's Kill Hitler, which aren't great stories, but Alex Kingston is always a highlight for me, even in those stories. Her charm and her ability to just make me want to be around her, and just to see that smile, that sense of swagger that she brings whenever she shows up. Yeah, and kind of almost like an inverse of Clara, she starts really well because her introduction in Series 4 is immaculate. And while there's some wonkiness in the middle, she also ends really well. Husbands of River Song, when it's done with its rollicking adventure story, which she's also good for, just because she has that swashbuckling kind of vibe, when it's done with that and it gets to the emotional tail end and the coda, it's a really satisfying wrap-up for that character. So, like I said, it's like Clara inverted. Start strong, end strong, wobble in the middle, but I just enjoy River's presence. Despite, unfortunately, being tied to some not great stories, I still enjoy her. Number 8, Sarah Jane Smith. The late, great Elizabeth Sladen. Here's the thing. Much like last time I did this, I am only taking her appearances in Modern Who into account. While she is a legacy companion, I am not counting what she did in the classic era, which could either be to her benefit or detriment, because she wasn't written super consistently, at least in terms of her function in the story. Sometimes she was written great, sometimes she was written kind of disrespectfully, for a lack of a better way to put it. I like the sense of experience that she brings, because she's masterful at being with someone like David Tennant and seeing him and realizing it's the Doctor, and it's like there's a flood of everything. It just all comes into her face, and you can see the years of experience that she's got, and it all comes forward in the performance. And she is just magnetic. You want her to stick around, and I would have liked her to appear more, although I know she had her own show going on, which is a show I haven't talked about, and I don't really plan to. The thing about the Sarah Jane Adventures is it was very much aimed at a younger demographic than I am or even was at the time it aired, so it never quite clicked with me, but I do still appreciate it, and it is pretty good for what it is, and it is in a lot of ways carried by her. The only thing that I don't love about her is I don't like that they made her kind of romantically pining for the Doctor, implying that very, very heavily, which I don't love because that really wasn't there during her time in Classic Who. But even if I don't like that decision, she does play it well. So, yeah. Number 7, Captain Jack Harkness. I am not going to be addressing any of the controversies that have gone on around John Barrowman. I have done multiple videos on them up to this point, so you can check out any number of them if you want my thoughts on that. Here, I'm only talking about the character, and as with Sarah Jane Smith, I am only dealing with the character here in Modern Era Doctor Who. I am not taking Torchwood into account, which here is definitely to his benefit, because here, he is swashbuckling and he is fun. Torchwood seemed to forget that he was supposed to be fun a lot of the time. And sometimes it worked. Like, it worked on Children of Earth because that story's not fun and it's not supposed to be. But as a character, he just was not nearly as fun in Torchwood. Here, whenever he shows up, he's fun. He does work best, I feel, with the Ninth Doctor because he brings a sense that the Ninth Doctor himself doesn't have, that sort of swashbuckling adventure sense, because the Doctor at that point is very much kind of in, trauma recovery from everything that went on in the Time War. And whereas when Jack is paired with 10, while they still work, it's a little bit different because 10 kind of has that swashbuckling thing on his own, so you don't need Jack there. But Jack is still fun. Whatever you think or feel about John Barrowman at this point, my own feelings are on the complicated side. There's still just such a high degree of joy that I still experience every time he shows up on screen. And that is worth quite a bit to me. Number 6, Rory Williams. Rory is a character who I like more every time I revisit him. Every time I go back and I watch him get more sure of himself, be willing to stand up to the Doctor, get more confident in who he is and how he fits into this overall dynamic within the TARDIS. Every time I watch him go through that, I like him more. He is admittedly a bit more of a companion to Amy than he is to the Doctor. Like, I don't think he ever would have traveled with the Doctor if Amy wasn't there, but so what? His devotion and his caring and sometimes being, or at least trying to be, the voice of reason when the Doctor and Amy are just more interested in adventure. He brings a really good additional dynamic so that the three of them never felt overcrowded. I tend to be an advocate for single companion when it comes to the Doctor rather than having 2 or definitely 3 companions at once. But that having been said, the three of them, because of how they played off each other, and because Rory was there more for Amy than the Doctor, it just made for a really good group dynamic. But even on his own, he's just a really endearing, sweet guy, and he makes so much sense once you meet his dad. Number 5, Martha Jones. Dr. Martha Jones at this point. Martha's another character who I've come to appreciate more and more as time has gone on. I think I kind of underappreciated her for a few reasons. First, initially, she only had the one series, so I didn't feel like I got to know her as well. But then in addition to that, in some ways, Series 3 doesn't actually do her proper justice. It tries in its own way, but I'm not sure it actually does the character great. And I definitely don't love that she pines for the Doctor romantically. But that having been said, the fact that she takes that as a character and uses it as a reason to be her own person and to leave because it's what's better for her and she needs to put herself over him, that counts for a lot. And even before that, Martha is inquisitive. She's smart. And honestly, her introduction in Smith and Jones is gold. I think that's a really underappreciated episode. It's fun in and of itself, but as a companion intro, it's dang near perfect. She's a really strong person, and the show at its best does a real good job of showing that. Even when she has to, kind of for her own sake, have to clamp it down a little bit with things like human nature. And I think it's the fact that it felt like she got backgrounded a little bit in stuff like that, or in Blink, where I had to really go through like second or third rewatch to really be like, I haven't been giving you the credit you deserve. And she keeps climbing up the list every time I do it. Number 4, Amy Pond. Amy Pond to me is basically Rose minus the aspects of Rose that rub me the wrong way a little bit. She doesn't have that same kind of jealousy towards, the Doctor showing interest in literally anything that isn't her, the way that Rose did. And that kind of makes a big difference. But she has a very similar kind of sassy relationship with the Doctor. And I love their dynamic, again, excellently introduced in her first appearance, because since he's her childhood friend, imaginary friend as far as anyone was concerned, she both adores him, but is also kind of already fed up with his nonsense because he left her alone for years. So the push and pull of that she can be in awe of him, yet also able to call him out on his BS when she has to, that balance works really well. especially with a doctor whose motto at times was "the doctor lies." Well, she's someone who's not going to let him get away with that. She was really good for that doctor, for Smith's doctor in specific. And she manages to have that strength without being perfect. She can have flawed moments. She can make questionable decisions. I don't love that she tries to jump the doctor's bones. But, again, me and the romantic angle stuff, I just never really works for me. So not a perfect run, but I enjoy her presence so much, and I like what she brings out of Smith. And again, the three-way dynamic with Amy, Rory, and the Doctor is one of my favorite TARDIS teams. Number 3, Bill Potts. Bill's another one who I appreciate more every time I watch her again. She is inquisitive kind of in the way that Martha was, but she doesn't have the same level of education, so her questions are often a lot more kind of blunt. She's frequently asking the questions that, well, you or I might ask. People are going, wait a minute, wait, what? Questioning basic premises at times, but in a way that, for me at least, was never annoying. And she was, again, the perfect companion for where Capaldi was at that time. For him to take someone who wanted to experience more and to learn, and that the appeal of her to him was that in a class where everyone else would get confused and frown, and she'd get confused and smile. She knows the universe is too big for her ever to understand, and that excites her. That doesn't frustrate her, and that's, frankly, a perspective that I share. So that helps a bit. But the way that she is able to interact with the Doctor and challenge him at times is really well done. And she also has a very fully developed sense of her own life, which Doctor has tried to do a few times, I think most notably with Clara, which sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. With Bill, it actually works quite well for me because we get just enough taste of it, of her trying to go on dates, of her working at the school, but it also never feels intrusive to her adventures with the Doctor. It just feels like giving her a sense of her entire life does not revolve around traveling with this guy. And given the show's tendency to have a companion get so involved with the Doctor that it does seem like that's kind of their entire life at this point, which is part of why the companion exits are almost always tragic, including Bill's, unfortunately, but it doesn't feel like her entire life gets subsumed by the Doctor. And that, to me, makes her a stronger character. I really love Bill. Number 2, Wilfred Mott. I said I was a sucker for the older companions. Wilf is one of the best. The sense of experience that he brings not only to his interactions with the Doctor, which, like that conversation between him and the 10th Doctor on that ship orbiting Earth is amazing and wonderful, and it breaks my heart, and things like that, but also seeing him in something like Left Turn, and from experience, he knows how bad things are in a way that Donna doesn't get immediately. It's easy to have old people in a show like this and have that be the butt of jokes. Oh, they can't run around as fast. They can't keep up with trying to understand the technology. But the benefit, if you do it right, is you can allow their wealth of experience to inform how they react and how they respond to what's going on. And Wilf does that in spades. You get that sense of a very fully lived life, for better and worse, behind everything he says, feels, does, the joy that he is able to bring, as well as the melancholy and sadness at times. It's not easy to take a character who, by any measure of society, is past their prime and probably past most of their use, and have the Doctor sacrifice himself to save that person and never doubt that question for a second. That is absolutely the right decision. The Doctor has his little hissy fit. Wilf says he shouldn't do it, but yeah, he should. Because Wilf is precious. Wilf is a treasure. And I love him. Which brings us to number 1, which has not changed from the last time I did this. Because number 1, still Donna Noble. She is, for me, the platonic ideal of the companion. And I do mean platonic ideal very literally. There is zero romantic angle between her and the Doctor. She's kind of grossed out by the suggestion. And both of them are always constantly going, oh no, we are not together. And that's not like a build up to, oh, they'll fall in love. No, they don't. That's not what they're here for. She's here to be his friend. She's here to remind him when he's overstepping, to ground him. He's here to show her a breadth of experience that she can't get anywhere else. They're there to call each other out for nonsense. They're there to make each other better. Remember how I kind of mentioned that Clara and the 12th Doctor kind of made each other worse, but in a way that was, like, most of the time decently written? Here, what I love about Donna is she and the 10th Doctor make each other better at every step. And Donna was a character who I did not like in her first appearance. And even going back and rewatching The Runaway Bride, knowing Donna is going to be my favorite companion, I still don't like her in that. But it is also kind of necessary for those experiences to change her as much as they do. She is vibrant. She takes no crap, not from the Doctor, not from aliens, not from anybody. She is the perfect balance to me of someone who, yes, wants to travel with the Doctor forever, but not because she's infatuated with him, not because he's swallowed her entire life, but because this is the fun and the joy and the sense of discovery and amazement that she doesn't want to let go. Donna Noble, best companion of the modern era. What do you think? How would you rank these? How badly do you think I screwed this up? Like I said, this is actually tough to talk about because I don't flat out dislike any of them, but I still have to give justifications for why some are higher and some are lower, and maybe I explained it in a way that makes sense, maybe I didn't. But whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments, let's talk about it. Patreon is not only what pays the bills, but also was what determined this to be the video this month. I gave a number of options for revisiting a ranking of Doctor Who related stuff, and the patrons voted. This was the one they wanted. It was by a very narrow margin. Might have only been one vote, but if you want to participate in polls like that, see videos early, most of the time when I'm properly on schedule. Any tier of support, you get those perks, and plus there's others at other tiers of support, but don't worry too much about that. Like, share, subscribe. Also help me out. Those don't cost you anything. But what I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You're the council. I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned. Now my thanks to my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Karak, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Udelki, The Oath of Boyd, Bernabilax the Poodle, Zach, Idolin, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Bookworm, Adam, RDL Taylor, Shane Ross, Jay Gorley, Brendan LaRose, and TT. If you want to hear me possibly butcher your name, check out the rewards on the Patreon. And thanks to all you folks.